Hello everyone, Melanie here and welcome back to the channel. Today I'd like to focus on the reasons why your partner is insecure, and although not everyone who is insecure has BPD, because this channel does cover your BPD partner and how to manage a relationship with someone with BPD, then I'm going to talk about the reasons why your insecure partner in the context of BPD is the way that they are. And I'm not making this video as a form of passing judgment. I am making this video so that you can better inform yourself if you want to make a decision about whether to stay or whether to go, whether you can stay or whether you are in over your head. And it's always good to understand and know what your limitations are and to know your limits and to be able to acknowledge if perhaps you've bitten off more than you can chew. And some people, even though they're on the BPD spectrum, and maybe insecure, they may be high functioning enough and self-aware to be able to work on their insecurities. So I hope with this information that I'm providing is going to help you make a better informed decision, help you better discern. Once again, this isn't about passing judgment and picking on people who are insecure. It's not the case, because out of these insecurities often do come a background of abuse and being bullied. So I just want to emphasize that this is not to point the finger. And if anything, if you're watching this video and you can relate, then maybe it could be something to look at within yourself, because we don't often see things within ourselves, but we'll see it in other people. It's an unconscious defense mechanism that's called projection. And I often have clients who are acting in similar ways that their borderline partners are, and they just can't see it in themselves. So this video is just to help bring some clarity. And if you've got any comments, if you've got any questions, got any feedback, I'm always happy to listen to this. Please email me your thoughts. My email address is in the video description. All right, so let's start with object constancy. What this is being able to see our external objects as being constant. So if a good person does something bad, they are still good. And this is something that we develop as small children, and we continue to develop as we mature. Seeing our primary caregivers, our mom, our dad, and seeing that they are good objects, and sometimes they do things which we see as bad, and in time learning that good people can make mistakes. They can say or do things which we don't see as good, but they are still good. And this is something that people with BPD generally struggle with. Now, to be fair, a lot of people don't really develop object constancy, regardless of whichever label we give for their mental health. Perhaps you can relate as well, and we can and do improve upon it as we mature. The thing is, with adult sufferers of BPD, it's like they haven't grown out of it, and they are split within themselves, as well as seeing other people as being good or bad. Now remember this, for as much as your borderline friend or partner or family member is judging others, they are judging themselves just as harshly. For as much as they're seeing the outside world as black and white, they're doing the same within themselves. So how a lack of object constancy looks like in an adult, well, for one thing, they do tend to see themselves as bad and are very defended about it. And they want to be seen as good. And how they feel about themselves on an inner level is how they look at the outside world. So they want people to be good, and they're looking for that idealized partner or friend or job or house or whatever the fantasy is. It's the idealized fantasy that it will be good and they will be happy. And alongside that, right below the surface is their own shadow and running away from it. A bit like how Peter Pan and the Lost Boys are just running away from their shadows. It's wanting to be seen as good and running away from their own inner badness and being terrified of being seen as bad. And it's hard for them to integrate the shadow. It's hard for them to look at their own shadow within, because it's a threat of annihilation to actually look at yourself and to integrate your shadow, to see that there is aspects of myself that I'm not happy with. It brings up a lot of shame, guilt, anger, memories of the past when you have been abused, memories of the past when you've been told that you are bad. If we replace the word borderline personality disorder with traumatized personality disorder and the survival response, this is more accurate. The personality that forms is built for survival, and it's built upon very shaky grounds because of trauma, because of abuse. So bear that in mind when you're dealing with someone insecure and they have BPD. It is a trauma response, and there has been a level of trauma that they've experienced. And trauma is subjective, okay? Someone who perhaps is a very sensitive personality might experience life events to be more traumatizing compared to a sibling who perhaps isn't as sensitive. And people with BPD often are quite sensitive souls and can be quite hypervigilant about things in their environment, or people saying things which they could deem as offensive or bullying, or confirming to them that they are bad. And it can be quite shocking if you're not used to this. Like, where did this come from? Like, you're having a conversation with your partner and you say something and you've been flowing, you've been having a good time, you've been laughing, and you say something and instantly their mood changes and they're offended. And you think, what just happened? And then their mood can completely change afterwards. And it can be very disorientating and hard to handle and very confusing. Very confusing. And the sad reality for many people who have BPD is that they are often experiencing intrusive thoughts of a paranoid nature, a suspicious nature. And these thoughts lead them to question the person that they're with, whether it's their friend, their partner. It seems that as BPD is a spectrum, the further someone is down on the spectrum, the harder it is for them to have a grip over their own mind. The harder it is for them to discern which thoughts are real and which thoughts are fear-based, which are based from anxiety, chronic anxiety that often goes hand in hand with BPD. And also bear in mind that it's called BPD, borderline personality disorder, because it's referencing the space that people occupy in between psychosis and neurosis. And with psychosis, it is being split from reality, really not being able to discern what's real and what's not. And that brings up a lot of shame. It's a lot of shame that it's the painful catch-22 situation, because if you want to transform yourself, if you want to change, if you have BPD and you're listening to this, it is possible to change, but one needs to sit with the feelings of shame and to accept that you have made mistakes, to internalize your locus of control. It is the only way. But with that comes a sense of annihilation and death. I am going to be making a video soon about the myth of Narcissus, and this is allegorically what it means when Narcissus kills himself and then his blood goes into the ground and transforms into the flower, a daffodil, which is what's called Narcissus. It comes in spring. It's an inner death, the willingness to break down the false self, the ego, to surrender, and it feels like a threat of non-being. It feels like annihilation. If you're not a stable person, if you're an insecure person, then you will be defended and guarded against breaking down your ego. And it's understandable. It's very understandable. And not an easy process if you're someone who has BPD, if you're dating someone who has BPD. It's very, very hard to live with. It is manageable and change is possible. I do want to say what is required to make change is willpower, a sense of will, because where there's a will, there's a way. I really, really strongly believe this. Self-awareness and a willingness to do something different, to change, to improve upon yourself. I would say that for people who are quite far gone on BPD, on the BPD spectrum, change may be quite small compared to someone who is more neurotypical or not on the BPD spectrum, or just has traits, for example. Change is small, but that doesn't mean that that shouldn't be celebrated. It's a wonderful achievement for someone. Say someone has clinical depression, someone is unipolar depression, and they struggle every day of getting out of bed. for them to actually get out of bed and get into some sort of self-care routine is a big step that should be celebrated and should be honored. And I guess with this video, if you are dating someone, you're trying to think, well, can they change? They say they want to change, but can they actually change? Yeah, they could if they wanted to, but would this be fast enough for you? And this is again practicing discernment over judgmentalism. There is nothing wrong with the speed at which someone is improving, providing that they got the direction right. It is direction and not speed that counts. But it's okay if their speed of change doesn't match your speed of change. That's fine. And it's good to acknowledge that, because you risk becoming a caregiver, a parent to your dysfunctional partner if you're changing at a much quicker speed than your partner. Is their rate of change suitable for you? And it's okay if it isn't, it's fine. And there's no need to judge them for it. People go at the pace they go at, and you really can't force someone to change. You really can't force someone to become self-aware. And if your partner's not even thinking that they need to change, if they're not even taking any accountability, responsibility for their actions, and just blaming you and just avoiding any sort of talk about it, I don't think these people will change anytime soon. I work in the field of change, and it requires a willingness to look within and to keep practicing. Keep practicing. So people with BPD tend to be split within themselves about being bad and being good, and they want to be seen as good and they don't want to be seen as bad. And a lot of this perhaps does come from abuse growing up. Perhaps they themselves had parenting in which they were criticized, they were bullied, and perhaps they also had enmeshed relationships with one or two of their primary caregivers. So as a result, when they grow up to be an adult, they are dependent on other people to confirm to them that they are good and to soothe them. So this is codependency right here, when you are relying on someone else to regulate you, when you don't know how to self-soothe, and so you will message people and rely on them to perk you up and make you feel better. And the problem comes is when this becomes a habit, when you become dependent on people cheering you up. And from what I've experienced, from what my clients have shared with me, it's very, very common with people with BPD where they just don't know how to self-soothe. They don't know how to make themselves feel better, to give themselves a pat on the back, and will rely on you to do this for them. So they want you, for example, to be complimenting you. They want you to behave and act in a certain way so that they can feel special. And this can come across as quite controlling and a bit manipulative as well. Like they'll do things and say things to you, but because they want you to say it and do it back to them. And this comes out of a place of insecurity, and they don't feel secure within themselves. So they are relying on you to do it for them. Often when you're dating someone or friends with someone who has BPD, you can become like the magic mirror on the wall. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? And we see this on Instagram and other social media platforms where perhaps they have an account and post lots of photos of their tits and ass for attention. So they can be told, yeah, you look great, you look good, you look good. And yeah, maybe it's, hey, it's my job. I have to be constantly putting photos of my body online all the time. Well, why did you choose this job in the first place? Just a thought. So needing supply source because they don't know how to give it to themselves. So they will look outside to build up their sense of self-esteem, whether that's through their work, through using social media, through relying on friends to boost up their ego, boost their confidence. Often it can be quite tiring and draining dating someone so insecure because you find in yourself constantly needing to reassure them. And the problem with this is that when you are constantly reassuring them, it sets the bar. It sets a particular standard for which they are expecting you to keep reassuring them. And it's quite exhausting constantly needing to reassure an adult person. It's one thing if it's a child, but when it's an adult, and you have your own responsibilities and your own needs to look after, it's exhausting to have to put your needs to one side or micromanage the needs of another person. And if they tend to be sensitive and easily offended, it means that a lot of time and energy is taken out of the day to reassure them, to make themselves feel better. And it can be quite exhausting. And a lot of my clients share how frustrated and angry they get. And it's like it can be quite manipulative and controlling as a way for them to almost, seems like they're trying to get attention seeking ways, which all of us can relate to. But when it's sucking up your energy in the relationship, when a lot of time and energy is dedicated to soothing someone else, to making themselves feel better, it can and does become a problem. Another thing I want to talk about with insecure people is that they tend to be quite jealous. So what I mean about jealousy is when your partner feels threatened by the relationship you have with someone else. So if you're a guy and you have another female friend and your girlfriend feels very threatened by this relationship, and this is born out of a place of insecurity, because perhaps she feels that, or she worries that you having a friendship with someone else could interfere with the relationship she has with you, that you being friends and liking someone else will mean that you're no longer interested and don't want to be with this person anymore. And I suppose a more secure person can realize that the love that you have for someone doesn't take away the love you have for someone else. And the more we can open our hearts and trust that love isn't restricted, and although love in a monogamous relationship is different to like the love that we have with our friends, we can still enjoy other people's company and still want to be with the person that we're in love with and have it be monogamous and not betray someone. But again, this is all born out of insecurity, the jealousy, the intense jealousy that my clients often share with me, the stories. Don't forget that they do experience thoughts of a suspicious nature quite often, and it can be hard for them to discern what's real and what's fear-based. Based on the stories what my clients share with me, it's common to hear the insecure partner feel threatened by their female friend they have in their life. Why is she so special? What has she got that I haven't got? It's very competitive. You're thinking you don't even need to compare yourselves because there's nothing to worry about. We're just friends. But often with BPD, they just can't get thoughts out of their heads. And the more insecure they are, often they can be very jealous people. It's not to say that they can't change, but it comes from their own journey of self-acceptance and love. It really is. All of us, every single person here can benefit with just loving themselves and loving others in a healthy way. Okay, please refer back to my previous video I made about healthy love and is it healthy to love someone so much? There's love from ego and wanting to control someone, and there's love from higher self, which is loving without attachments. That's not to say you can't have rules and terms and conditions in a monogamous relationship, but that you can love someone without needing to control their lives. So as I said earlier in the video, people with BPD tend to be split within themselves about being good and being bad. And when they start friendships and relationships, they want the ideal partner. They want the fantasy, idealized relationship, and can be so excited about meeting someone who ticks the boxes that they see what they want to see. And often this can be fantasy based. They think, finally, I've met someone who can give me the life that I want. I can be finally seen and loved in the way that I want to be. This is the life. This is the person. And when reality hits in and they start to see that this person isn't as they had pictured them, and when the bubble does burst, it can mean that you start to be devalued, and their intrusive thoughts of a suspicious nature means that they'll be hypersensitive to things that you may say and be more easily offended. And it's hard to bear. When you're dating someone with BPD, it's like you're holding their shadow, and they can't see the shadow within themselves. Them projecting their own stuff onto you and being sensitive to seeing it in you and being very angry and triggered about it or whatever emotion, this is all unconscious. Projections are an unconscious defense mechanism. They are guarded about doing any sort of shadow work because it threats breaking down their ego, their sense of self. And so you will be the person to be the magic mirror. You will be the person who perks them up and says all the right things to make them feel good. And you will also be the person who bears the brunt of their angst and their pain and their suffering when they lash out. You are the person that they project both their inner gold and their shadow onto. And we'll keep finding people that they can do this with. So moving forward from this, people can improve upon their security. People can empower themselves and become more confident. And in my experience, this comes from internalizing your locus of control. This comes from accepting the part you've had to play in the demise of friendships and relationships, in acknowledging your shortcomings and your edges, and rather than running away from them, to learn to sit with them and think it's okay. It's okay to start from scratch. It is okay to acknowledge your problems and your faults, because it's the only way to make a change. It's the only way, because if we keep blaming others for our mistakes, for things that go wrong, if we keep seeing our shadows in others and not in ourselves, we won't be able to make any changes. In order to make changes, one needs to internalize your locus of control, needs to see where you've gone wrong and to make reparations. And making reparations may not necessarily be with the person that you've harmed or wronged done or hurt, but instead committing to changing yourself so that you can become a better person. And all of us can do this. It's not just for people with BPD. All of us can do becoming better people. And I hope with this video, perhaps you can make a better decision about whether the person in your life is going to change anytime soon. And if they are changing, whether this rate is okay for you. Are you improving in this relationship, or are you finding yourself being worn out more and more, and just your health is declining? You've got no friends now, you've got little social life because your life seems to be revolved around this one person who constantly needs your attention, and for you to make themselves feel better and for you to take the blame as well. Another problem with dating someone insecure, and we see this in friendships as well, is that they can be very controlling as a way for them to feel powerful. So people who have BPD have experienced trauma in their lives. And the thing about abuse and trauma is that it's very disempowering. And so when people who have been robbed of personal power grow up, it can become easy to feel powerful again by controlling someone else. And this seems like the easiest option, but this doesn't actually help you become a more powerful person, really. Being domineering and subjugating others to your will, this isn't true personal power, okay? This doesn't change you being deeply insecure at your core. The only thing that changes is personal mastery. Personal mastery and learning how to be in control over yourself is what's going to help you improve your self-esteem. This is what's going to give you personal power. Not controlling someone else, learning to control yourself. This isn't the easiest of options. In fact, I barely know anyone who can commit to a daily meditation routine or a daily mindfulness routine. It's easier to control your environment than it is, it seems, to control your own inner environment. But the rewards for someone who is willing to tread the path of personal mastery is very, very rich. And you will become more confident. You will become much, much, much more secure within yourself. Because when you can manage your emotions, when you can give yourself things that you've been dependent upon other people, independence, self-reliance, it boosts self-esteem and confidence. And again, this comes with internalizing your locus of control. So until you are able to admit that, okay, whilst other people contribute to the problem, it was me who put myself in this situation, or I have been this way. I can't keep blaming this other person. I'm just as guilty of being this way, or I have actually acted in this way. It's not all their fault. thoughts like this, thinking like this, helps you to internalize your locus of control. And it's the only way. It really is. For as long as you want to keep blaming others for what's happened and hating on others, you're not going to change anytime soon. So I hope this has been helpful, and there's much more to say on this. I was just shooting from the hip here. A lot of my insights not only come from my own training, but from the many stories that my clients share with me. And there's always commonalities, there's always common themes. So know that you're not alone if you're experiencing this. And if you yourself can relate to being insecure, you can change, all right? And you can work on yourself. And I'll leave it there. So I am back to counselling work. I am popping to Greece for a few weeks, but I am back to work nonetheless. So get in contact with me if you want to hear more about my counselling services online. All right, take care and bye for now.